Okay, so are you ready to dive into some seriously old school education ideas?
Oh, absolutely. You know I love a good blast from the past.
Today we're hanging out with Charlotte Mason, a name you might not know, but trust me, this woman was a total revolutionary when it came to teaching kids.
She was way ahead of her time.
We're digging into her book, A Philosophy of Education, specifically that intro to Volume 6.
Which, by the way, was written right after World War I. Can you imagine?
Talk about a time of chaos. So what was she freaking out about back then that still resonates with us now?
Oh, just a little thing called, "Is education failing us?" Sound familiar?
Yeah, I think we've all had that thought once or twice, or, every other day when the homework battle gets real.
Right. And get this, Mason was wrestling with this over 100 years ago, and what she had to say about it might surprise you.
Hit me with it. What was her big diagnosis?
So Mason was convinced that education had become way too focused on, well, being useful, like just cramming in facts and skills so kids could get jobs.
Okay, practical, but kind of a soul-crushing view of education. No.
Exactly. And she saw this whole utility thing as connected to this idea of faculty psychology, basically. The idea that the mind was like a muscle you could train on anything. But Mason was like, hold on. It's not just about flexing your mental muscles. It's about what you feed those muscles.
Okay, I'm starting to see where she's going with this. You wouldn't eat junk food all day and expect to be healthy.
Exactly. And she felt like that's what was happening in education. We were force-feeding kids all this random information without any thought to whether it was actually good for them.
So where does Darwin fit into all of this? I'm sensing a tangent coming on.
Oh, it's not a tangent, trust me. This is where things get really wild. So back in Mason's time, we're talking late 19th, early 20th century, people were obsessed with Darwin. But here's the thing.
They didn't quite get it, did they?
Not quite. They kind of took his ideas about competition and survival of the fittest and ran with them in a not so great direction, like justifying some pretty intense nationalism and even the idea of a Superman.
Yikes, that took a turn.
Right. And Mason saw this seeping into education. Like, let's just train kids for utility only so they can compete in the struggle for existence. She believed this totally missed the point of education and, more importantly, was creating a generation more focused on getting ahead than being decent humans.
So she's saying that we're so busy making sure kids can pass a test or get a job that we've forgotten to, teach them how to be good people.
Exactly. And that's where her radical solution comes in, a liberal education for all. But she wasn't using liberal in the political sense we often hear today.
It's not like liberal arts college liberal.
Yeah, right. She meant liberal like a feast for the mind. History, literature, art, all the good stuff. And accessible to every kid, not just the wealthy elite.
Which was a pretty revolutionary idea back then. Like, imagine saying that every child deserves access to Shakespeare, regardless of their background.
Right. That was Mason throwing down the gauntlet. She believed in a truly egalitarian education system.
So how did she propose to make this grand vision of a liberal education for all happen? Did she have a step-by-step plan?
Oh, she had ideas. Very specific ideas. And one of the cornerstones of her method was something she called narration.
Okay, narration. So not just memorizing facts and spitting them back out. What does she actually mean by that?
Right. It's way more active than just memorizing. Picture this. You're a kid. You've just read this amazing story, let's say about Joan of Arc. Warrior, leader, total badass.
Love her.
Right. Instead of just getting grilled on dates and daddles, Mason thought you should be able to tell that story in your own words, like really own it.
So it's about making the knowledge your own, kind of like how we all retell our favorite movie scenes, but with, a little more historical significance.
Exactly. She was convinced that narration was the key to making knowledge stick. It makes you really think about what you've learned, process it, digest it. And she didn't just use this method for history either. We're talking science, literature, even math.
Okay, now my brain is breaking trying to imagine narrating algebra. But I see what you're getting at. So where do these living books come in? Didn't she talk about those a lot too?
Ah, yes. Living books. This is where Mason's method gets really fun. Instead of those dry textbooks, she wanted kids to dive into books that were actually enjoyable to read. Exciting biographies, historical fiction that transports you back in time, even well-written science books that make you actually want to learn about photosynthesis.
So instead of being told that photosynthesis is important, you get swept up in a story about a world without plants. Suddenly, you care.
Yes, and here's the best part. She wasn't about spoon-feeding information. She believed in giving kids the space to explore, make their own connections, maybe even get things wrong sometimes.
Speaking of space, didn't Mason have some thoughts on keeping lessons short? Which, in a world of constant notifications and TikTok dances, feels weirdly relevant.
Absolutely. She was way ahead of her time on that one. Short bursts of focus attention, like 20 minutes max for younger kids, then building up from there. And get this, after those short lessons, let them go play.
Wait, hold up. No endless lectures. This woman is speaking my language.
Right. She understood that kids are wired to learn through movement and exploration, and get ready for this, even boredom.
Boredom. As in, the sworn enemy of every parent on a rainy day.
Hear me out. Mason actually saw boredom as the birthplace of creativity and deep thinking.
So we're saying that by not scheduling every second of their day, we might actually be encouraging them to use their imaginations more.
Interesting. Okay, so what about things like grades and rewards? That's kind of a big deal in the 21st century. We love our gold stars.
Well, let's just say that Mason was not about that gold star life.
No gold stars. Wow, okay. Even I'm feeling a little rebellious now. So what was her reasoning there? Well, it goes back to those living books and narration. For Mason, those weren't just methods. They were about cultivating a genuine love of learning, like the reward, the learning itself, you know?
Okay, but be honest. How realistic is that in today's world? What about motivating kids? What about those college applications? We can't just chuck grades out the window.
You're preaching to the choir. It's a different world now, for sure. But here's the thing. What if she was onto something about intrinsic motivation? Like, maybe those external rewards, the grades, the praise, maybe those make kids less likely to actually enjoy learning for the sake of learning.
It's like you get so used to chasing that A+ or that gold star that you forget why you were even trying in the first place.
Yes, and that's a really important thing to think about. Even if we don't completely overhaul our whole education system, it makes you wonder, are we accidentally creating little reward seekers instead of, lifelong learners?
Okay, so my mind is blown, but this has all been very theoretical. Did Mason actually put this into practice? Like,
Yeah.
were there actual schools doing this living books and narration thing?
Oh, absolutely. She wasn't just some ivory tower philosopher. She founded schools, wrote extensively about curriculum, even trained teachers. In fact, there are still schools around today all over the world that use her methods.
Get out. So it's not just some interesting idea in a dusty old book, it's actually doable.
Totally. And look, you don't have to go full on Charlotte Mason to get something out of her ideas. I mean, she offers a different way of thinking about education. It's a framework.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into 100-year-old education wisdom, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think it's this, what if we stop seeing education as just a means to an end? Like, it's not just about jobs or grades or even winning at life, right? What if it was about cultivating wonder and curiosity and a love of learning in our kids and ourselves?
So the next time you find yourself stressing over homework or test scores, maybe channel your inner Charlotte Mason and ask yourself, am I feeding that love of learning? In my kid, in myself, in the world? And on that philosophical note, we'll leave you to ponder those deep thoughts. Until next time, stay curious.